Great, thanks for joining us. My name is Shelly Goehring, and I'm part of MHP's Community Assistance Team. We're starting today a three-part series for with sessions that are targeting primarily affordable housing trust funds and Community Preservation Act communities, but of course are open to anyone, particularly anyone interested in affordable housing. We're focusing on, we're going to be introducing a new map tool that our Center for Housing Data has created. We're going to touch on a couple technical assistance programs as well. Throughout the session, please feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And we are joined by a couple of my colleagues here today. I have Christine and Emma and Reneri, I think Laura Schufelt, so a variety of the community assistance teams here, as well as other staff at MHP. And thanks for everyone else for joining us. I want to just give, for those of you who may not be as familiar with MHP as others, a little bit of an overview of who we are. We have four key teams that are kind of external facing. We have our Center for Housing Data that's joining us today, and they work diligently on collecting, analyzing, and sharing data to help inform housing policy on the local, regional, and state level. We have our community assistance team, which I'm a part of, and we really are focused on helping to build capacity at the local level to support affordable housing. We also work with housing authorities as well as nonprofit developers. We have a lending team that has lent over $1.4 billion to support the creation and preservation of affordable housing, particularly rental housing. And then we have a home ownership team that is focused on helping to build the ability for low and moderate income households in Massachusetts to become homeowners. Today, we're going to start by introducing you to a new map that our Center for Housing Data has created, looking at communities that have affordable housing trusts, as well as the Community Preservation Act. We're then going to touch on our intensive TA for trust communities. We are accepting applications now for new communities in 2026. And then we're going to end with introducing a new pilot grant program at MHP that's targeted to boards and commissions, and we're calling it a Mini Boost grant program. Again, just a reminder to be putting your questions in the chat, and we will address those questions throughout the session. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and then let Ellen bring up her slides. So the program that Ellen and Richie are going to be sharing, they are both part of our Center for Housing Data, came about because years ago when I started at MHP, I asked a staff person just to map the communities in the state that have trusts and that have the Community Preservation Act and the surcharge percentage that communities have passed CPA. Over the years, we've then added the major highways and MBTA stations and counties, and I was asking, bringing up, updating this map to Ellen as MHP was welcoming interns from Messina College out of Boston College. And we thought updating this map could be a good project, but Ellen said, well, what if we make it interactive? Because it's always just been a static map that I have printed on my wall that I refer to on a daily basis. So Ellen's idea was to make it interactive, and that meant that they were able to layer much more data. So it's now become in my opinion, an exciting map, and we want to introduce it to all of you. Ellen and Richie.
Great. Thank you so much, Shelly, and the Community Assistance Team for organizing today's training. My name is Marya. I'm the Research Manager at the Center for Housing Data. I'm joined today by Richard Cherry, who, as Shelly said, has been an intern with the Center for Housing Data and is a student studying data science at Messina College. And so we have been working on this project over the past semester while Richie has been with us to turn, as Shelly said, what has been a more static map into something that can be more accessible, more interactive, and we are excited to share that with you today. So a little bit of an overview of what Richie and I will go through. We'll give a little bit more background about our team at the Center for Housing Data and what we focus on. We'll talk about what data was already out there for Community Preservation Act communities and affordable housing trusts, and then some of the additional data that we've been bringing into this map. Talk a bit about what we can learn from having kind of all this information in one place. And then Richie will go through a demonstration of the map tool, and we'll have time for questions at the end. And as Shelly said, feel free to put any questions in the chat as well. Community assistance team will be monitoring that as we go. So first, a bit more about the Center for Housing Data. So we are a team within MHP that really focuses on conducting research, providing resources to improve policy at all levels of government and for all Massachusetts residents. So we do that in a number of ways. One of the main things that we do is create data tools like Data Town and Residentity, which are public facing, accessible, interactive, provide downloadable data that really help kind of drive what we hope are better, more informed housing policy conversations at the local level, at the state level, the regional level, but really trying to get those tools and resources out to people who need and want them. We also work with policymakers and officials to help guide program and legislative decisions. So we worked on things like the Housing Choice Initiative and MBTA communities. We also partner often, like we're doing today, with our community assistance team to both learn from the local experience and also hopefully help inform that a little bit. So really kind of the two-way street of what we can learn from communities and community members working on the ground and what kind of resources that we can hopefully provide you as well. And that's all with a goal as well of promoting kind of greater data literacy and empowering people to access and use data when you're discussing housing policy, kind of other policy topics. So we do a lot of that through presentations and trainings like this. So we'll talk next about what information is out there for Community Preservation Act communities, housing trust communities, and how our team has been working to assemble this data and supplement it as well. So first, in terms of affordable housing trusts, so there's no kind of centralized state collection of information on affordable housing trusts. This is something that Shelly has taken on and has been doing for a number of years. And as she said, has worked with members of CHD in the past to turn what she collects in kind of a massive spreadsheet into a map that includes CPA information as well. So this is currently a static PDF map that's available on MHP's Housing Toolbox. Folks can download it. As you can see, the last iteration was updated almost 3 years ago at this point. So this is information that, Shelly does an amazing job tracking. But with the opportunity to update this map, we were looking for ways to make it more interactive and more usable for people out in the community as well. So the information that Shelly collects includes what type of trust a community has set up. So whether it's a municipal affordable housing trust, so those set up under MGL Chapter 44, Section 55C, which is the majority of housing trusts, or those kind of what we call other housing trusts that are set up through other mechanisms, which is a much smaller number of trust communities. So she tracks all of that information. And so this is what we've been able to build off of to create our interactive version. Compared to what's collected for affordable housing trusts, there are kind of better established from the state data mechanisms for collecting and reporting out information on CPA communities, especially around kind of the background information. So one of these sources is MassGIS, so the state agency for geographic data. So they maintain data on when communities adopted the CPA, what path they took, so whether it was a ballot question or went through the legislative body, They have the breakdown of what the vote was, so if it was kind of a landslide or if it was a close vote. They also include details on any exemptions that a community might have included when they adopted their CPA. So this data is available through their interactive Mass Mapper platform. So folks are able to go on and explore this data. You can also download it as a shapefile if you're a GIS user to be able to kind of analyze it a little bit more yourself. And then the Community Preservation Coalition is another really incredible resource just for all things CPA related. So among other things, they maintain a data bank that you see here, which provides information on a number of different topics on the CPA. So they have things like the average cost per homeowner of the CPA surcharge in each community. They have links to the local CPC websites and bylaws. There's a whole section on history of attempts to increase or decrease or revoke or otherwise modify the CPA. There's a really detailed projects database to be able to explore how communities are spending their CPA money. They have counts of the homes that have been created or supported with CPA funds, as well as acres of open space preserved. And then revenue and expenditure data organized by municipality. And then data on the statewide CPA trust fund as well. So if there's information you need on the CPA, this is a really great place to start. One piece that's been a little bit harder to reliably track and understand is the broader scope of how communities are spending their CPA funds. So what the Community Preservation Coalition collects is really a town by town or city by city view. So you can go in and see how Abington or Acton has been spending their money over the years, but it's a little harder to get a full view of how that compares to what other communities are doing. And so the Division of Local Services through the Department of Revenue collects this data every year from CPCs, but it's pretty spotty. So there's a CP2 form, which is what communities need to fill out. And there's variation in how that's filled out, depending on who in the town or the city is doing it. Not all towns and cities have been reporting as frequently as they should be. So annually is what they're supposed to do. So what we're excited about is that this is changing. So the DOR is taking kind of a firmer stance on this reporting requirement and are now saying that they won't set a CPA community's tax rate if that community hasn't submitted its CP2 data. So we're hopeful that with this change, which went into effect with this past year's data, that the quality and reliability and completeness of this data will improve moving forward. So we have a pretty good set of data from this past fiscal year, spotty going back, and hopefully even better than this year going forward. So, as Shelly said, with the opportunity, with Richie coming on board our team this semester, we had an opportunity to kind of think about how we could expand the information we were presenting on this map and bring in some kind of supplemental data that could provide more context on kind of local community housing characteristics. So we brought in a few census data points from the American Community Survey, looking at median household income, as well as the share of households who rent their homes. So being able to get a better understanding of what each community looks like. And then we're also able to bring in data on the state's subsidized housing inventory, which is now being presented and shared by the state in a more accessible form. So this is the information that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, or HLC, collects and updates. They update it every 2 years. So this is tracking the count and the share of homes in each community that are affordable to low and moderate income households. So with the aim of each community getting above 10% of all year-round homes in their community. So HLC has previously made this data available as a PDF. So again, you can download it, but it's really hard to integrate that data with other information you may have. They also have a kind of searchable widget on their website which is good if you're looking for one community, but again, hard to compare across communities. Recently, though, HLC has created this interactive map on their site and made this data downloadable as a CSV form so that we can integrate it and analyze it alongside other data, which is what we're doing this map. So bringing this all together, we created what we're calling the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Trust and Community Preservation Act Explorer. So this map will be available on our housing toolbox. It's a link that we'll be able to share with you for you to be able to see this data, access it, and explore it on your own. And in a couple of minutes, Richie will kind of take us through how it works. But before we do that, we wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of the value that we see in this type of tool. So I'm thinking about what we can learn from having this data all in one place. So in addition to kind of saving time by not having to pull information from a few different data sources, we can also gain some new insights by analyzing kind of how this information interacts with each other. So we can look at first kind of some really basic information on how our communities are using these tools that are available to them. So looking at some of these kind of basic stats, we can see that most of the now over 200 CPA communities that have adopted are at a 3%, that's 79 communities, or a 1%, 59 communities at those surcharge levels. So the other levels in between are much less frequent, especially 1.25. I'm curious about the community that chose that as their level. But you can see there's kind of a real clustering around the 1% and 3% surcharge levels among communities that have adopted. We can see on the trust side, as we said, that the vast majority of the, by our count, 151 local trust funds are those municipal affordable housing trusts. So established through that MGL chapter, and a smaller number in kind of that other trust category that have a little bit of a different establishing structure. And then looking at now kind of the interaction of some of our data, over 80% of communities with a housing trust have adopted the CPA. So we can see that and understand that this makes sense that, CPA funds can be an incredibly important funding source for housing trusts. So I think this is a logical pattern that we're seeing where communities will have both of these tools at their disposal. When we start to dig into this a little bit more, we can start to see some more interesting patterns that are emerging among communities that have the CPA, and then whether or not they have an affordable housing trust. So when we're comparing communities with a trust, which is this taller stack of bars, with those that do not have an affordable housing trust, we first see that really similar numbers have the CPA at these lower surcharge levels. So up through kind of this medium orange bar of the 1.5% surcharge level, we have really similar numbers of communities. What becomes more interesting is that when we get to the higher surcharge levels, these are really concentrated in communities where you have an affordable housing trust. So about almost 4 times as many communities with a trust have a CPA surcharge of 2%. About 3 times as many with a trust have a surcharge at 3%. So again, we're not looking at any sort of causality or statistical significance in these, but these are really interesting patterns in understanding where we're seeing both trusts and these higher CPA surcharge levels. And then we had the advantage of bringing in some of our additional data, and we can, again, look at some patterns, again, that are not causal, but looking at patterns of our different types of communities. So we see, looking at some of our census data, along with our CPA and trust data, we see higher median household income in communities that have both trust and CPA. And then these middle categories with only one or the other have smaller numbers in them. So we can look, if we just combine those two, we can see this pattern a little bit clearer, that you have the lowest median household income in those communities with neither of these tools, with one or the other is in the middle, and then the highest median income in those communities with both. When we look at the subsidized housing inventory, it's a very similar pattern to household income. So again, we don't look into, is it income that's driving both of these factors versus where kind of the CPA and trust and SHI interaction occurs. But if we're looking really at the pattern, we see that the highest SHI percentage is in communities that have both an affordable housing trust and have adopted the CPA. So 8.5%, over 8.5%, compared to, again, that 10% benchmark is what the state is looking for. So those CPA and trust communities at the median are closest to reaching that benchmark. We can also look at patterns in how communities are spending their CPA money. And again, all the caveats about the expenditure data still hold. We're looking at 1 year of data. This is looking at just the community housing expenditures. We know CPA funding from year to year from a community can be lumpy, right? If a big project comes up, there'll be a lot of funding in 1 year, less in another. So again, as there's more data going forward that we can rely on, we're hoping to look at more patterns across the years. So this is one point in time, but it is interesting for us to begin digging into this data and think about the types of questions we can be asking as we're getting better and better data moving forward. So if we're looking at first, this is communities that have the CPA and do not have an affordable housing trust. So we have 74 communities in that bucket. 63 of those communities reported any expenditures to the Division of Local Services for the past fiscal year. So a handful still haven't reported their data. The vast majority of those reported no expenditures for their housing bucket. So only 22 of them spent any money out of their community housing bucket in that year. Again, this is going to vary year to year, but these are the stats that we see from this year. So that ranged from 900 in Monson, so a smaller community, up to about 2.5 million in Dracut. So again, understanding there's likely a big project happening there. So probably not a pattern we would see in that community year after year. If we look at the median among the communities that spent anything, it comes to a median of $52,000 towards community housing among these communities without a housing trust. If we do the same thing for communities that do have a housing trust, we see a much higher median spend. So this is 127 CPA communities that do have an affordable housing trust. Again, not full reporting, so 101 of those have reported their data so far to DLS. And a much higher share reported some amount of housing spending. So 78 of those communities spent a non-zero amount towards community housing in the last fiscal year that ranged from 1,400 up to over 19 million. So that's cut off on our chart or else we wouldn't be able to see anything. But Cambridge and Boston spend orders of magnitude more than other communities. So they're way up there. But there is much more of a range of spending here with a median of 290,000 among these communities. So we can look at how these two stack up against each other. And you have Dracut up here with pretty high spending and a couple other of our orange kind of non-trust communities. But we can really see this kind of pattern of higher spending, again, at least in this one fiscal year, towards community housing among those that have a housing trust. So we end up with about, at the median, spending about 5 times more out of that community housing bucket among those with an affordable housing trust. So again, this is the kind of analysis that we are just starting to dig into, that we're excited about as we are sharing this tool. And so what we want to do next is I'm going to change my share, pull up our map, and Richie will talk us through the Explorer that we have created.
Okay. All right. Now we'll take a few minutes to show you the map. Before I begin, the link to the map is going to, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Before I begin, the link to the map is going in the chat and is now available for you to explore. When you first open the map, the text box up here gives you more information about the Map Explorer and the information it contains. As we talk about, um, we combine information on types of affordable housing trust that Shelly collects with information from the state in which communities have adopted the CPA and at what surcharge level. We combine this basic information on each community into one interactive platform for this first time. To this, we added data that communities report to states departments of revenue on their CPA funds. It is important to note here that this data is self-reported and imperfect. The information shown on the map is for fiscal year 2025 and current as of November 2025, at which point about 160 of the 201 CPA communities have reported their data to the DOR. When you explore a map, you'll be able to see whether a community has no data on their CPA funds because it's not a CPA community versus whether there's no data because it's not yet reported. Um, we also work we also work to bring in more data on communities like borders housing profiles. For this, we join data from like state subsidized housing inventories, or short for like SH, our short version is SHI, sorry, which was available in an Excel form instead of just a PDF for the first time this year. For more context, we added census data on each community median household income and share of renter households. Uh, all right, now let's enter the site and see what it looks like. On the bottom right of the map, on the bottom right of the map is a pancake button that allows you to see the different layers that we added to this map. The map includes major highways shown as green line, commuter rail stations, and purple circles. Dark outlines for the county borders, lighter outlines for municipal borders, and different shading and colors for housing trusts and the CPA surcharge levels. You can click on the icon next to each layer to turn its visibility on and off. And on the left side of the screen is our interactive legend panel that allows you to filter and view communities by the trust and CPA categories. The number of communities that meet our filter set criteria is also shown in in this legend. When we begin, all 351 communities across the state are visible, and we can see the different symbols for the 151 cities and towns with housing trusts and the 200 ones that have adopted the CPA. We can click on the different subcategories shown in this legend. For example, to see what communities have created municipal affordable housing trust or where they adopted the CPA with a 3% surcharge. Clicking on the circle icon under the total count make also subcategories visible again. If we click on community, we see a pop-up with more information. First, we can learn more backgrounds on the community, why its median household, with its median household income and the share of households who rent their home. For example, in Worcester, we see the city's median household income is about 67,000, and about 58% of households are renters. Then we have the count of units going towards the SHI and the community percent of SHI units, letting us know if it has reached the 10% threshold. Here, here we see Worcester has over units, letting us know. I'm sorry. Here we see Worcester has over 12% of homes included on the SHI. Next, we see Worcester has a municipal affordable housing trust and has adopted the CPA at 1.5%. Following, we can see how much Worcester brought in through a CPI surcharge in its most recent fiscal year. How much in the city spent towards the three designated CPA buckets, how much they have in reserves, and how much is in their undesignated reserves. As a reminder, these are self-reported numbers currently shown for just one fiscal year. As a community reporting to the DOR becomes more standard in the coming years, we hope the data becomes easier to interpret and compare. That's a look at one community. We're excited for you to explore them out for yourself. Before we open it up for questions, I note that if you click on MHP's logo at the top of the map, you'll be directed to the housing toolbox where you can find a permanent link to the map plus many resources on the Housing Trust, CPA, and other important local topics. Thank you. Mm.
Great, thank you very much, Richie. And so we are excited to share this with you. I will make sure that the link we shared is actually public as we've been working on this. But let me see if I can bring it back to slides, and then we can open it up for any questions that folks have.
Fantastic. So I think actually, if you want to stop sharing your slides, and then I think we're gonna bring up Richie as well and do a little bit of Q&A. There are some questions that I'd like to cover in the chat.
Great.
Um, Great. So thank you so much, Ellen and Richie, for the work on this. It's a fantastic map. We internally love it, and we're getting some positive response in the chat too from folks that are with us today. Yes, thank you for the clapping. Fantastic. So one question is that someone is asking for links to the different data sources, and we don't have those. There might be a couple on the housing toolbox, but we don't have all of them. Can people link from the map to the actual data sources?
We can add that. So that is, I have all those links at the end of the slides. So I think those will be shared after our presentation today, so folks can take a look at that from there, but we'll also add those to the map so you can look back at the original sources as well.
That'd be fantastic. So we have another question of someone asking whether we've looked at expenditures over and above the 10% that is required to be set aside for housing each year. And I just wanted to answer that because in order for us to do it, we haven't done that yet. And in order for us to do that, it would be having to go in per community each year and determining what 10% is and then comparing that to what they actually spent. So just the logistics of doing that is complex and to keep up with it. So we haven't done that yet, although certainly appreciate that would be really meaningful in a lot of contexts. Another question is, would the percent of total CPA allocation spent on housing be a better indicator than gross expenditure? So that gets to the percent of, again, of just the complexity of actually determining. Well, that might actually be, if it's just in general, the percent of the total expenditure. We can consider, I think that one, that's less complex than whether it's over the 10%. So that's a good point. Thank you. Richie, someone is wondering if you might want to share a little bit about yourself and your what you're working on.
Okay. Um, my name is Richard Cherry. I was an intern at MHP. I worked at the CHD department. I'm a student at Boston College. I major in data science. And yeah, that's really all I need to know.
We had have really appreciated Richie's work this last semester, along with some of his colleagues at BC. So there's a question, is the map dynamically updated in that it's connected to a variety of other live reporting systems, or does it require continual updating?
So it needs to be continually updated. A lot of this information isn't updated all that often. So even if it was kind of connected to live sources, there wouldn't be that much change. I think what's hard is some of like what we're seeing in the chat is, for example, AIR is now at 3%. So kind of the channels that information kind of gets passed to and through can kind of take a while to then get into all the official data, right? So, like we said, Shelly has been collecting all the trust information. So, when she gets that, then we know it. Depending on when the state updates its CPA data, the GIS information it has, I think, was last updated at least a year ago. So, it's a challenge, right? When we have this type of tool, we want it to be updated as updated as possible, but it's also hard to be kind of tweaking community by community. So that is one of our next questions is at what frequency can we be updating this to make sure that it's useful and has the most accurate information possible when that information is still kind of coming in from a lot of different sources.
Thank you. So we've had a question about, do we have data about the different programs that our affordable housing trusts offer or run in Massachusetts? And the answer to this is that we don't have anything comprehensive. There's the dynamic in Massachusetts where communities aren't even required to report that they've established a trust in the state. There's no entity that's set up to collect that. There's no requirement of reporting that. So we have thought at different times of could we fill that, but unlike with the Community Preservation Coalition, the statewide entity that supports community preservation at communities, that's a membership structure where communities contribute. They help to fund the state CPC, and we're able to do that with the CPC because communities have a guaranteed income every year, but the trusts are set up differently where not every trust is even funded. Um, Sometimes they get really irregular income, so there just isn't a way to create an entity that's similar that would help support the trust. So if you have a great idea about how to collect some of that data, MHP is working on revamping the housing toolbox, and there might be some capabilities that we're able to collect data through that in a way that we can't right now. So we do think about how to do that, but there just isn't a great way to, or a simple way to do that yet in any comprehensive kind of way. So that might be a very unsatisfying answer, but it is what it is. Are there any data source that shows annual and cumulative percentage of CPA funds collected that have been directed to affordable housing? The best place to look at that information is simply what's on the Community Preservation Coalition's website. So how they've put the CP3, the self-reported information to the state, the way that they've put it on their website, and to see what you can. I think that they have links to some of the raw data, I think, that you could use as well. So I think that that's the best place to direct you for anything more on CPA resources. So another question, do your communities have reduced permit policy for affordable housing? Okay. So this question is, we have a community that's been asking, this went around my colleagues this morning, but do communities, this is really not for this site, but if you wanted to put it in the chat, is just asking if your community reduces permit fees for affordable housing development. So if your community does, we'd love for you to put in the chat, respond to Carolina that you do. What sort of other housing trust did you come across other than affordable housing trust? So we didn't focus on any other kind of housing trust. There's this seasonal communities legislation that will allow a different kind of housing trust. We are focused on affordable housing trust. That's the work that we primarily do at MHP. That's the work that we're really monitoring in this setting. So we didn't look at any others at this point. CPA data is your community preservation committee should know where to submit. It's through the Department of DLS, Department of Local Services, under the Department of Revenue. So that's a CPC question. What year was this map built on? Okay, so that's good. If you see incorrect data, we should actually add something to the map of where to point out incorrect data. So I'll make a note of that with error. So that's something that just wasn't updated. Thank you. And I think that that's the main questions. Potential to add STR. So is there a potential to add STR tax data to the map? And I don't even know what that is, STR tax data. So we need to look into that.
So I
Chapter
think
59.
short-term rental tax data, I think the challenge is always
Oh, it's
how
got
it's
it.
collected and where and how widely. And so, yeah, I think we're definitely open to hearing other pieces of data that would be useful to include here. And if they are available widely enough, I think would be great to add those.
And there's also suggesting the tax exemption for affordable housing. So that's interesting too, that more communities are implementing the tax exemption for affordable housing. So we'll pay attention to that too, because that could be an interesting layer for this as well. Absolutely. Yeah, great. Thanks for the ideas. Any other ideas? Pop them in the chat too. Great. So we actually are, I think we are going to move on. We will review the other comments as well. Thank you so much for the audience, your engagement, and making other suggestions. That's fantastic. It is something, this is the foundation, what Richie and Ellen have put together, that we are hoping to layer additional information. And when we think about, do we collect trust bylaws and ordinances and make those easy accessible? Are there other pieces like trust guidelines or other pieces of information that might be useful that people can just find in one place or search for it? So any other suggestions, we'd be happy to hear those. Ellen and Richie, thanks so much for your time and for the effort this last semester. And we look forward to using this map and adding to it in the future. Thank you so much. We are going to switch now to our intensive technical assistance for trust communities. Great. So we are going to talk about our intensive TA to support affordable housing trust funds and communities that are interested in establishing a trust. Again, put any comments or questions in the chat and we will try to answer those. So this is a technical assistance program that our community assistance team has provided for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And it's really an attempt to try to build the capacity of our local housing trust, affordable housing trust funds, and also to help communities establish new trusts. So we have a round that's open right now. People are submitting applications. This series will run from January 2026 through October, so about 10 months. We are asking communities to have some kind of current housing needs analysis or housing production plan. So within the last 5 years, just so we have some data to work with. We ask that you identify either a housing trust fund goal or project that you can make reasonable progress on in a 10-month period, and that you're able to move forward on this project when we announce communities in January. So something that's ready to go. And we do require that you have the support from the municipality, so either the chief executive officer or town administrator to sign the technical assistance award. It's not a cash award, it's staff time award, but because it's a 10-month commitment, that we are asking for there to be municipal support in this. So it's for existing affordable housing trust funds or communities that are interested in having support to create a trust in 2026. I want to point out that this is not a real estate development program. We will not help to identify municipal sites to potentially build on. We won't be doing pre-development work on a specific site. It's not a real estate development program. It really is about trying to support your trust to be hopefully feel more confident, to be more effective, or to really to help kind of identify their role in the community. So some of the kinds of things that we will give consideration to is if your trust is new and you haven't yet created a mission statement, or if you've been around for a while and kind of want to revisit some of your previous documents and your mission statement, we can help facilitate the conversation around the trust members considering their role in the community and how they want to articulate what that role is through a mission statement. Similarly, we've worked with several trusts to identify goals and strategies to help create a bit of a roadmap moving forward. So we would start with your existing plans and the existing identified goals, but keeping in mind that your trust is just a small board of volunteers, that we would help you identify 2 or 3 measurable goals and then some strategies to help you reach those goals. And then talk about an implementation plan that would get into tasks to move forward on specific strategies to address your goals. This is an example of one community a few years ago, a small community that created 2 measurable goals. Their trust decided that there are 2 key things that they're going to work on. One, create 100 units of low, moderate income rental and homeownership housing over the next 5 years. So for this small community, that's a little bit ambitious. When we say create, when a trust is creating, we're not talking about the trust being a developer of housing. We're talking about the trust helping to fund affordable housing development, helping to dispose of municipal land for affordable housing development. So trusts being actively engaged in that process. We're talking about trusts that are actively supporting developments through the permitting process locally. So showing up, advocating, and helping to support some of the conversations between different boards that are having to review the development. So it's not being the developer, it's helping to support development. And then their second, and then I'm sorry, then they came up with different strategies to issue an RFP for a parcel that they had for 1 unit of housing, provide funds to support accessory dwelling units, and they've created this program and they've funded a couple ADUs so far. Provide funds to support a 46-unit development that was already starting, but they put it in there that part of their strategy was to help fund this development, to complete 4 units at one site, 8 at another site. So they had identified those parcels, but then one of the strategies was for the trust to be actively engaged in helping to support those developments forward, and then to acquire a property to dispose of for affordable housing development. And then their second goal that they created was to raise $1 million annually over 5 years, for 5 years. So a total of 5 million. Ambitious for this small community, but they wanted to push themselves. And then they came up with some strategies of how to do that. Request 80% of short-term rental tax revenue, have an annual request to the Community Preservation Act funds, fundraise for donations. They are a community on the Cape, and they hold a summer event to seek donations. So really trying to benefit from all the tourists, how the community gets so much larger in the summer with tourists, and then to work on securing 1 or 2 other revenue streams to diversify their funding sources. So this is an example of a process that we could help with under the intensive TA to help facilitate this conversation with your trust board. We've also worked on trust guidelines for a couple communities, and this is just a document putting kind of pretty much everything in the same place in a document to make it easy for trust members to just understand the structure of the trust when you bring on new trust members, but also for the community to understand how the trust functions. And for those who may want to apply for funds, for them to understand the application process and your selection criteria. So it could be a document where your mission statement, goals, and strategies live, where you might have a few sentences about the roles and responsibilities of the trust, particularly in relation to other housing boards you might have. It can outline priority and eligible funding activities, any stipulations you have for funding. So the area median income that you're targeting, for example, it might have some language around project monitoring and reporting your requirements, either for the trust specifically or perhaps for the community, the town, or the city. It can give the process for applying for trust funding, the selection criteria, so how you're going to be weighting applications, particularly if you have a few at the same time, and then the application form. So putting it all in one place. This isn't a document to do just to check a box. It's really if it seems like it would be useful and if it would be helpful for trustees to be going through all these kinds of topics to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page, and that you have a clear process and that there's transparency in the community. And then another thing we could help with through intensive TA, and then we did this with one community, of helping the trust, which in the particular case that I'm thinking of, it was a new trust, but they already had a housing authority and they already had an affordable housing committee. And so we actually spent some time working with representatives from each of those boards to talk through what are the roles of each of these entities in the community, um, so that there's clarity around the roles of each board. And there was some conversation about then how those boards can work together collaboratively to move the need for more housing, affordable housing forward in the community. So that's another thing that we could help to facilitate those conversations locally. So we are accepting applications now. They're due on December 22nd. We'll announce 2 to 3, maybe 4 communities in January. It's a online application. It's pretty simple, and my contact information is in the application if you have any questions to reach out to me. Again, this is not a real estate development program. It's really about helping to build the capacity of your trust board or to help your community establish a trust if you don't already have one. I would like to pause and just see if there are questions specifically about this. Emma or Renee, have you seen any? Well, this application
There
period.
was one that I thought we might want to go back to. Some people weighed in, but are there any communities with CPA that automatically transfer a set amount to the Affordable Housing Trust annually, or is it typical for a trust to have to apply yearly to the CPA? Is there anything you'd weigh in on that, Shelly?
So it, there are a few communities that seem to transfer pretty much automatically. It still needs to go through the legislative body, but Cambridge is a community where they transfer 80% of their CPA funds to their housing trust every year. And they have, I think, since the beginning, very early on. So they really see their housing trust as the community housing arm of their CPA, and they just put the majority of the money every year into housing. And that's just a decision that the community has been making. Um, Somerville transfers, from what I'm told, as about 45%, and I think that that's pretty standard year to year. And I don't believe that the trust has to apply for that. I think that that's just what the CPC recommends. And every now and then, I think that there's a community that will make the recommendation to transfer perhaps the 10% to their trust. If any of you are communities where it's automatic, then please put that in the chat. We'd love to know. But again, this is one of the pieces of information that we just have to keep our ears open and see if we learn it, but there's no reporting on it. In some communities, they will allow the trust to apply for funds for just any eligible CPA purpose under community housing, but it doesn't have to be a specific program or development. And in other communities, they're the most kind of most strict of requiring an application from a trust that's for a specific development or a specific program, and not as flexible. So it crosses all of those. I think that the most common is that CPCs tend to expect the trust to apply for funds, whether they have to be specific or whether it's general. I think that varies community to community.
Right. There's a few other questions here, but one related to the program, Shelly, is will the technical assistance address how trusts are staffed?
Uh, so not specifically, I mean, that could be part of what we talk about to see if if some staffing is possible, but we won't specifically address that because this isn't a funding grant, it's a staff support. So does that help at all?
There's one more here. I'm just reading it. Someone is researching how much funding affordable housing trusts get directly from municipal funds, whether it's free cash or direct appropriations. Is that anything MHP would track, or would she have to ask each community individually?
Yeah, so that would be some data we would love to have. We just don't have a way to collect it at this point. So we know of some communities that are transferred free cash, but we don't have any mechanism for to collect that data. And so, we've thought about, could we create a way for a form that a community could, on its own, a trust could fill out on an annual basis? And would communities just do that because they would want to have access to that data? Or would the data be so spotty that it wouldn't be very helpful? So it's something that we talk about, but we don't have a way to collect it yet.
Great. Catherine put her contact information if anyone has information.
Yep.
Reach out to her directly.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. So the last section, the last thing we want to talk about is a new program that MHP is rolling out in 2026. And this is a new mini grant program, and it is funded by the Eastern Bank Foundation. And it's part of some of the boards and commissions work that we've started last year. So this is targeted specifically to boards and commissions. We're calling it a mini boost. And it is a very small, it's about very small projects, really trying to help boards and commissions that are touching or interacting with affordable housing, that are trying to do something with affordable housing, trying to help them with something specific that's short term, hopefully helping to nudge something along or helping to increase clarity on their role in supporting affordable housing or in the permitting process. So it's opening up in January. These are mini projects that can be completed within 3 to 6 months. It's specifically for municipal boards and commissions to support the creation of affordable housing. We are requesting support from the municipality in applications. So either the chief executive officer or town administrator will need to sign the TA award. And we are encouraging anyone who decides to apply for this, to also participate in our March training series, specifically for boards and commissions. So we ran it last March. We will be running those again. So we are encouraging folks to also utilize the information in that series. The kinds of projects that we're imagining for a mini boost grant that would be qualified for a mini boost would be things like support in prioritizing municipal parcels for affordable housing development. So, of course, many communities have a town planner, or they might have a few different planners. And so some communities, that may not be a need. But we have a lot of smaller communities where they may have municipal site parcels, but they may not have the planning staff to help with that. So a possibility could be one of our consultants to assist one of your boards in identifying your planning board or your housing trust or what board it might be, to consider different municipal parcels and do some initial work on prioritizing them. This is not going to be doing pre-development work. Again, this is not a big enough grant to do that, and we have other programs at MHP to support that. But this is really more to get a look at what are the resources that the municipality might have and to do some prioritizing. Another option might be having one of the consultants that we've identified to facilitate a conversation between different boards that are interacting with the housing permitting process, but perhaps have processes that aren't aligned or that maybe slow down the process. So it could be having someone help facilitate conversations between your zoning board, your board of health, and your conservation commission, perhaps, to help them perhaps become a bit more aligned and help to expedite the permitting process on the local level. Another idea could be guidance on municipal jurisdiction based on zoning. So again, if you have sufficient planning staff, then maybe that's not something that would be necessary. But for some communities, or if your planning staff is really stretched, which isn't the case in most communities, then perhaps an outside consultant could help your board, planning board, or other board understand municipal jurisdiction based on zoning, your kind of how you're restricted based on zoning, and perhaps offer some suggestions to help allow the affordable housing, multifamily permitting process run more smoothly. There could be a mini boost project that's on helping a board or a couple boards understand the financing of affordable housing and the importance of the local role or local contribution in that. There are a lot of other different ideas that you might have, but they're small projects that can be completed in 3 to 6 months that an outside consultant could help kind of supplement what you have, the capacity you have locally to help move work forward on affordable housing, specifically supporting the capacity of boards and commissions. So the application will open in January. You'll submit online. The application can seek short-term problem solving, training, and or support on a specific housing proposal or initiative. So another possible mini boost project could be if you have an affordable housing development that's been proposed, a consultant could potentially help facilitate either some of the review with the different board or a couple perhaps community meetings around the developer, but had to have someone that could help the community kind of navigate some of that over the short term. So it's not extensive. MHP will then review applications to ensure that what's being proposed is compatible with the small scale, short term effort. When we tentatively accept a proposal, we will then schedule a meeting with the applicant, with MHP, and with a consultant, identified consultant, to agree on a scope, and then MHP will issue the grant agreement to the community that's been accepted, and the project will move forward. It'll be between the community and the consultant, and MHP will just be a support in that. And then MHP will pay the consultant directly so the community doesn't have to be in that space. So again, the application will be open in January. We will be reviewing applications on a rolling basis. We have the funding for 15 awards in the calendar year of 2026. We're calling this a pilot, just an idea, not sure how it's going to work or how people will respond to it, but hoping that it will be help be a little bit of a nudge to help support boards and commissions that are interacting and engaged in housing and permitting affordable housing. Because we've never done this before, we don't know if we're going to receive 20 applications in the first month or whether we won't receive any for 5 months. So we just have no idea how that's going to go, but it will be a rolling basis. And you can reach out to me through December or next year, of course, to ask about it or to run an idea by us. We'd be happy to engage. And when the application opens in January, there'll be more information about the process and the program and ideas of the kinds of projects we would entertain. So I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions in the chat or if anyone has any ideas about that, if I wasn't clear yet. Okay, how quickly will awards be announced? We're planning on initially so again, we've never done this before. It's new. We're not sure how the response is going to be. At this point, we're going to be meeting every 2 weeks to review any applications that have come in with the expectation of turning that around within 2 weeks. So hoping to have a steady review and steady acceptance of projects. So we're not giving a specific amount, but it's like a $2,000 project. It's a small project. That's why we're calling it a mini boost. And so we'll handle the cost, but it'll be a scope that's decided on based on that it's a small amount of money, it's a short-term project, and it's a consultant of a consultant list that we've already identified. That will be so a consultant will be assigned to the project. We'll decide on a scope. It's small. So that's why the project ideas are short term and a small engagement with the community. Again, so with the mini boost, we're not saying what the dollar amount is. It's based on the project and not so much the dollar amount. Any other questions that anyone sees in the chat that I'm missing? Oh, I shouldn't have stopped sharing. I have other Good grief. So just a few more resources to wrap up today. MHP has a lot of different resources to help support communities in affordable housing. I wanted to point out that Community Assistance Team has a page on our website, MHP's website, around technical assistance. We have a variety of different technical assistance programs, programs that are more on real estate development, working with housing authorities, working with municipalities. So there are links to those programs and to apply for those programs. We also have a general technical assistance application that is a link on this page as well. So if you are wanting more general technical assistance from us, you can feel free to fill that out. And then we have a variety of online resources. Some of them are from the Center of Housing Data, like Datatown, which gives data points for every community in the state. We have the Housing Toolbox that Community Assistance maintains, and it has a wide variety of information about affordable housing, about zoning, about different local tools like trusts and community preservation communities. And we are starting to embark on revamping this toolbox. So we also have, some of you may have seen it on LinkedIn, but we have a survey that we're asking for feedback of what might be helpful to improve toolbox. And then we have different sources like guidebooks and operation manuals for housing trusts that you can find on the Housing Toolbox. And then we always want to be a resource for your communities. And here's my information. I think that Emma also put my information in the chat. And we have 2 more sessions coming up. Next week is on dispute resolution for municipal boards and staff. This is being offered by Kayla Allen of the Dispute Resolution Center in Western Mass. And what I really like about her presentation, and I hope you'll join us for it next week, is that she not only is going to look at what conflict is and how to address it, but she's also going to encourage you to look at yourself and to consider your own conflict style, how you address conflict or how you respond to it, so that you can better kind of be informed about how to manage yourself in conflict. Because, of course, in the midst of challenging public meetings, it's really just ourselves that we can control anyway. So it's helpful that she'll help you reflect on your own style, as well as offer suggestions about how to manage conflict in broader meetings. I'm going to stop sharing and just see if there are any additional questions that have come up.
Don't think I've seen any,
Okay.
but if anyone has any, now's your time.
Great.
There's
And you could
actually
actually,
one question that we missed. It is, do you list how many towns have approved an override for funds going directly to trust?
we don't, but I only know of one at this point. I think that Orleans is the only one that I've ever heard of, but so we don't have that information if there are other communities. If there are any other communities, we'd love for you to drop that in the chat. Love to know. So just a heads up that this session this week is shorter. Next week, we are expecting for the dispute resolution session to go for an hour and a half. And then our session on the 17th, where we're going to be digging into accessory dwelling units. We're going to be announcing a new incentive program that MHP is helping to develop. And then we're going to talk on the real estate exemption for affordable housing that was brought up in the chat. So we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to have a community share of their program. That'll be on the 17th. We expect that one to run for an hour and a half too, from noon to 1:30. We'll be recording all. This will be put on the Housing Toolbox along with slides, so you can access that and contact us at any time. We thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks again to Ellen and Richie for joining us to share the map. Thanks, everyone.